Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session, our Open Docs Academy session. Graham is still on vacation. You'll see him next time, but this time you'll have to make do with all of us. There are a lot of us here today, and we're all waiting to hear from Julia, who's going to tell us some really interesting stuff. But before that, a couple of small announcements. We do have issues in our uh, issue list that some of them get taken up really quickly. For instance, the other day I put one up and within like an hour or so, someone had taken it up. Uh, that's the good part. But some of them also tend to get delayed really long. So for months, there's nothing happening. And even with a little bit of follow-up, things don't seem to happen. So let's try and get that going in a better manner if possible. Uh, and I mean, if you can try and get it done, and if not, maybe we could try and assign it to someone else who's more keen about or has the time to do it. So let's hope that takes off. Oh yeah, another announcement, Kirtana and me, we both are going to be talking about this academy at UbuCon Asia, which is happening next weekend in India. And we both are going to go there and talk about this. I'll also be talking about Ubuntu on public cloud, which is the team that I work with. So we have some talks planned, and we are excited about that. And I think that's about it for right now in terms of announcements. Julia, if you're ready, then over to you. We want to get on board.
Thank you. So let me share my screen. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so my name is Julia, and I am a technical author here at Canonical. I joined this year, so I am rather new. And I thought it would be nice to look at some of the challenges, or in general, things to expect and tips for onboarding as a technical author. Not necessarily at Canonical, although, some of the things we will talk about do apply to Canonical as well, but in general. And I hope this will be useful, and I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts afterwards. Oh, and of course, I did talk to a bunch of my colleagues here about onboarding, and so this is like a shared effort, and thanks everyone for contributing. So let's start. Have you ever been a newbie? I mean, I'm sure we all have been a newbie at some point in our lives. But this is to say, even if you are experienced and you have worked maybe as a technical author or a technical writer before, or for many years in another company, you can expect to be overwhelmed in the beginning, right? So my suggestion here is to approach your new experience with the beginner's mind. What does that mean? It's a concept that comes from Zen Buddhism, which basically means to keep an open mind, be receptive, and act as if you were a beginner, although maybe you're not. So that's going to help you a lot as we go over all the challenges. So welcome to your new team. What are you going to expect on your first day? Well, that's going to be a lot of, HR tasks, filling your details here, access internal systems, and join the chats, and look at your calendars, the usual stuff. And of course, on your first day, you will be meeting your team, your managers, whom you've probably already met during the hiring phase. And you will meet, your engineering team, your docs team. And just like that, in about 5 seconds, your first day will be over. But then you have your first week left. So that's also going to fly pretty fast. You'll probably have some HR onboarding stuff to complete, like compliance training or required reading. you'll also have to start familiarizing with tools and processes that are implemented within your team, not just the documentation team, but also with the engineering team. And you will want to start reading more about your assigned product. As you know, as technical authors or technical writers, we do work on a specific product or area of products. So that's where you want to start becoming, you want to start reading about that and become familiar with those concepts. And your first week is going to be gone just like that. But then what happens also, you will also notice that you will probably have some recurring meetings in your calendar. Maybe the daily stand-ups, the syncs, and the one-on-ones. And those are kind of going to set the pace of your days and of your week. So you'll start to recognize some kind of routine that you can adopt for the following weeks. And then this is really important, and it was important to me, but also to other technical authors here. You will get to meet your buddy. What's a buddy? Buddy is like not really a mentor, but like a friendly face that you can talk to, that you can ask questions, any kind of question pertaining to your onboarding. Could be something about the company, about your team, about your responsibilities. And you should really take advantage of that. We do have a buddy system here at Canonical, but if you happen to be joining a company where they haven't adopted this system, I'm sure you can just ask your manager. And I mean, usually they'll be happy to point out some specific person that you can talk to in the first few days, or maybe even weeks, depending on how available they are. But then the challenges. So this is what I really want to go over with you, the so-called elephant in the room. So it's all great, and you'll be excited to join. You've been looking forward to this day and this time, and it's going to be great overall. I mean, it usually is, it's like the beginning of a love story. But then you start noticing things that are hard, okay? It depends on the team you're joining, how experienced you are, where you're coming from, and also your individual personality, maybe your work style. There are going to be a lot of challenges, and hopefully you can overcome them with a few tips here and there, or help from your colleagues and your buddy. And in the next slides, I will try to go over all of these, but basically it's all about how to build a team remotely, how to deal with information overload, time management, that's always an issue, and the challenge of picking up new tools and practices. And then, of course, the challenge of mastering your product. So joining a remote team, how can you become part of a team and really establish personal relationships with your colleagues if you're spread out across the globe in different time zones? I mean, that's not easy, right? Especially if you've never done it before. And later, after the presentation, I would like to hear from you if you've worked remotely before, or if it's a new thing for you. So some tips here. It's always a good idea to set up individual calls with your colleagues, maybe just 15 minutes here and there to talk about where you're coming from, what's your life story, get to know each other as you would do in the office, right? And you'll be surprised how much you can learn. And maybe you can make it like a recurring meeting to just check up on people and see how they're doing. Then you're going to be expected to join the recurring meetings, like daily stand-up meetings, especially in the engineering team, but also in the documentation team. There are going to be recurring meetings each week. And it's a good idea to join them and be there, not just to learn to recognize the faces and the names, but so also that your new colleagues can get to know you. And often at Canonical, it works like this, but I guess in other companies as well, teams will be divided in squads. So like smaller groups of people based on their time zones, right? Because if you are like on a completely different time zone, it's going to be hard to meet regularly. And that's a good thing, right? To establish your close group of colleagues that you know you will always be seeing at the same hour each week. Then you'll have to figure out team dynamics, right? Because you're new and you don't know, how different people interact, what the reporting lines are, what the specific roles and strengths are, and also how your team relates to other teams, how your product fits into the organizational strategy or structure. That's something that you will have to learn to be able to work effectively in a remote environment. And then, of course, once you become more familiar with that, you can also try and establish connections with other teams and team members outside of your closer radius. And with time, you will get there. It is possible to build teams and meaningful relationships remotely. Then there's information overload. This is a big one, and I think it's unavoidable, because when you join a new company, of course, there's onboarding tasks that people have thought about and like prepared for you, but they are probably going to overlap, especially if you're going to work both in documentation, in engineering, and then you have the overall HR tasks. So you have to be patient with that. You will be hearing about a lot of important info, and it might not always be so easy to find it, depending on how organized your company library or whatever it's called is. So it could be really hard to find, and you will find yourself amassing like a ton of bookmarks, or even ask other people to share their bookmarks with you, so you can kind of be sure to have all the links to relevant information. And it will come a time when people will mention something like an important document or an important guideline that maybe you haven't seen before, or maybe you saw it, but you didn't really know that it was so important to pay attention to it, right? So you will be confused. And I thought it was quite revealing, something that Shane said. I think Shane is here with us now. That after starting, several people indicated that there were some important spreadsheets that I needed to know about. You've seen this, right? And here comes this huge spreadsheet with lots of colored blocks. And I mean, that's going to happen to you. And that's okay. That's okay. You cannot know everything in advance. And just, I think the only cure here is just to be patient and to listen when people tell you, this is important, and try to make a mental bookmark of that in addition to your browser's bookmark. And then the next big challenge, I think, is time management, right? Because as a new hire, you may be tempted to take on more tasks, more responsibilities that you can handle. Actually, you want to prove that you can do it and you're great, and you want to maybe stay overtime to try and complete everything that you have committed to. But my advice is, don't do that. And it's not just my advice, but it's something that I heard from many sources. Why not? Well, because you can't do everything immediately, right? Nobody expects you to do everything now, okay? So as a new joiner, it's normal, it's absolutely normal that you will want to, take on challenges and participate and want to stand out. But you don't really have to prove anything to anyone. I mean, you got hired, you already proved what you had to prove. So now it's the moment to really take time to learn as much as you can in this onboarding phase, and so that you can make a meaningful contribution as soon as possible. So in terms of time management, I think you can expect maybe a longer onboarding process than normal, because you're not just a writer, you're also supposed to collaborate with the engineering team. So you have to understand the engineering aspect of your product. You also have to communicate with the product managers to understand the vision of the product. So it's going to take a while. Just be patient about that. And don't try to cram everything into, 1 day or 1 week. Also, the mixed expectations. Sometimes engineers, especially if they have never worked with a technical writer or a technical author, they don't really know what to expect, right? Because at Canonical, for example, technical authors are placed within an engineering team, but they also participate in the wider documentation activities, right? So being placed in an engineering team leads to the confusion. Okay, so are you an engineer, right? Or maybe are you just a tech writer? So that also leads to some mixed signals, and that makes the onboarding process a bit longer and time management a bit harder, especially if you have to try and accommodate different expectations. Also, if you're usually you will be assigned to one product. Okay, so it will be slightly easier to learn about the product and get to know the engineering team and such. But sometimes you will be assigned to multiple projects, different teams, or maybe one large team with different documentation sets. So that also takes time, right? And you cannot juggle all these things without sacrificing your time. So you have to be wary about that as well. And the risk, of course, is overcommitting, right? But the only strategy here is planning sensibly. Maybe in the beginning, in the first few weeks, try to undercommit. Only commit to very small things that you are sure you can get done, so that you get, momentum and a sense of accomplishment. And of course, check in with your managers and establish some reasonable milestones with them. But it's not going to be easy, right? And because if you've worked remotely before, you know that sometimes the line between work time and personal time can be a bit blurry, but try to protect that. And then we have the fear of not knowing. What does this mean, right? When you join a new team, there's a lot of new stuff to learn, tools, processes, and maybe you already know it all, right? But we cannot know everything, right? And nobody expects you to know everything. So even if you already know the tools that the team is using, maybe you don't know exactly how they're using them. Or maybe you're new at this and you don't know some of the tools that are being used. And that's okay. I mean, it's completely normal and okay. You should not feel stressed about this, right? The thing is that onboarding materials will not cover everything. It's impossible, right? So it's up to you to identify any areas or knowledge that is missing from your background, and your pool of knowledge, and try to fill those gaps in your own time while you're at work, obviously, but independently. So that's something that you will be expected to do. You should be able to pick up on these pointers and explore and go further on your own. But if you need help, you should also feel confident and ask for help, right? Because as we said, nobody knows everything and it's okay to ask questions. But, basically you just have to aim to familiarize with the tools enough to feel comfortable. You don't have to master everything in the first few weeks or even months, right? It's enough to just get up to speed so that you can contribute and collaborate with your team effectively. And the last challenge, which I highlighted, there may be more, but this is what I thought about, is the product. Maybe you have never heard about your product, right? Maybe you have heard about the product, you have worked with it somewhat, but you don't know it so well. So as a technical author, you should also become an expert in your product. And that's not easy, and it will not happen overnight. It will take time, it will happen, but you really have to be patient with this and work to build this knowledge. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, you have to use the product, right? Ask your engineers, how can I install it, use it, test it? Is there anything I should try? A tutorial, maybe that someone else wrote before you joined the company. Learn the terminology and the jargon of your product so that you can, communicate more effectively with your team. Review the documentation that's there, and while you're doing it, maybe also highlight areas of improvement or gaps. You also should try and figure out how deep you're expected to go into this technology. Okay, some products have various layers to them. Ask your manager and your team, is it okay if I stop here? Okay, would it be beneficial if I went in as deep as you engineers? So try to be open to learning as well. And of course, familiarize with the roadmap. What's the roadmap? It's the features that are being planned in this, this year or this month, and then of course the planning of what will come. It's important to know what's going on and what's coming, because otherwise it's going to be really hard to talk to your engineers on a daily basis, right? And then try to develop your own vision. This also will require a bit more time, and it will be helpful if you can talk to your product manager regularly to understand, where the product is going, what is its positioning, and this will help you also define a better strategy for the documentation. But this is something that will come, at the very end of it all. And tips. So now that we've seen the challenges of onboarding, some of them at least, here are some ideas on how to onboard a new company, especially if it's remote, but not only. I think these are generic enough to work for any company. So first of all, talk to your buddy. And if you don't have one, try to get assigned to someone. They have been through this before. If you don't have a buddy, maybe you can talk to a colleague. They will be happy to share their experiences. Maybe someone who joined recently, they'll be, more eager to share, the successes and the pains of onboarding. Then set up milestones with your manager, especially for the first weeks, first month, 3 months, and so on. They know the product, they know what's needed in terms of documentation, they have a better vision than you, and so they will be very happy to help you succeed. And it will be easier for you to have milestones, so you can track your progress and get a sense of accomplishment, after 1 month, 3 months, or 6 months. Otherwise, you'll feel like you're kind of navigating in the dark. Then, of course, as always, be proactive, be flexible, be open and receptive, right? My tip here is try to fit in before you can stand out. What does it mean? That when you join a new team, especially a team that's already well established, if you try to overdo it in the beginning, some people might have resistance, right? Because they don't know you. So it's best to listen first, see what's going on, and then you can really find your place within that team and make your individual mark. Be curious, right? That's quite obvious, especially if you are in this kind of position. I think curiosity is one of the main aspects of it, right? Question what you see, question the product, go deep, keep learning. Even if you're experienced, you can always keep learning, and reach out if you need to. No need to be afraid to ask questions. And as we said already, don't worry about proving yourself. Give yourself permission to explore, especially in the beginning. Try to have this kind of freedom that's given by the fact that you don't really know anything yet, to kind of have a bird's eye view of the product, of the team, and maybe you'll discover something interesting and some new angle that nobody else thought about before. And then be patient, like we said, and be kind to yourself. Even if in the beginning you'll feel like you're only making small contributions and maybe tiny, improvements or small tasks, in the end, they all add up. So at one point, you look back and you say, okay, all my tiny contributions, they did really have an impact on my team. Congrats. And yeah, and the last tip I can give you is learn to accept feedback gracefully. That's not easy at all, right? But think that people who are giving you feedback, they actually care about you. If they didn't care about your success, they would not be sharing feedback. They would just ignore you, right? So if you hear feedback that's maybe not so easy to receive, try to take it gracefully and to grow from there. And I think that's it. Oh, one more thing, like someone else used to say. So when you join a team and a company that's full of brilliant individuals, it is only natural that some of us might suffer from a mild or serious case of imposter syndrome. I don't know if you're familiar with this term, but it's basically like feeling like a fish out of water. Like, what am I doing here? Everybody is so brilliant. I am not so as good as they are. And they are so great, and I feel like I am not. This is, I think it's quite common among high achieving individuals. But you know what? Don't even think about it. You're here now. So just go on with your onboarding, take your notes, learn what you can, and be ready to share what you learn with the next wave of technical authors. And forget all about the imposter syndrome. And I think that's it for today. And I would really like to thank one more time all the people who helped me, contributed to ideas and everything else. So you know who you are. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. That was wonderful. Extremely comforting and reassuring. It's really nice to hear that. So it's probably nice to hear it when you're starting. So, but even now, it's really nice to hear that. And I'm hoping others will find it useful who are onboarding somewhere. So now we are open for questions. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to jump in.
Well, I have a question that I really want answered, maybe even from you, Dimple, or from our fellow technical authors. Had you worked in a remote company before, or was this something new when you came into Canonical?
Well, I've never really worked in a remote company, but with COVID, it was like non-optional. And everyone sort of got that experience of working from home for a couple of years. So, but the systems that are required for a remote company to work efficiently, I think that wasn't in place. And that's quite a challenge. And that's probably something that Canonical has got done really well. I mean, they've been doing it for ages now. So I don't know, any of you others have remote experience?
I had a similar experience to you, Dimple. I was not in a remote organization, but during COVID, we obviously moved to working primarily remotely. And I then after that, we moved back to in-person primarily. And on reflection, I feel like because Canonical has just been doing the remote working setup for so long, I almost feel like, even though I've only been here for 3 or 4 months, I feel like I've talked to some people at Canonical more than I did at 7 years at my previous workplace, just because there's so much, like, there's a lot of one-on-one, there's a lot of mentorship, because I think there's an awareness that if that's not provided, there can be issues. So yeah, this is my first primarily remote work setup, and I think the support is really good. But I think, going back to kind of Julia's presentation, I think you have to sometimes avail of that support also. Like if you have a buddy, for example, you have to try to set up those meetings with that person, ask the questions, and make sure you give people the opportunity to give you the support you need.
Yeah. Along these lines, when we are talking about meetings, so before we go ahead to some of the other questions, there are a couple that have come up. what if you have too many meetings? Uh, for instance, at Canonical, we of course have our engineering team stand-ups, but then we also have meetings for grooming our Jira tickets, for planning the pulse. And a team might have multiple squads. Each of them would have these sets of meetings. And then if you're in the documentation team, again, there are a lot of meetings. And overall, Canonical as an organization will have their own set of meetings, their own set of trainings and roadmap meetings and so on. So any person coming in usually seems to have access to a lot of meetings. So does it make sense to attend all of them, or how do you decide which meetings to attend, and should you attend all of them? Is it a requirement, and how do you decide that? Julia, you can take it, or anyone else?
Yeah, I can give you my perspective and then I'll hand it over to someone else. Of course, I think in the beginning it's important to identify the most key meetings, like meetings with your direct team and your direct supervisors, or affecting your work directly, right? But I think if you try to attend all the meetings in the beginning, you're not going to have enough time to focus on what you really need to do to get up to speed with stuff. But maybe, you know, as you become more familiar with your colleagues, the roadmap, the product, and all that, then maybe it does make sense to attend additional meetings because you have more context and they can be beneficial.
Dan, I think you have your hand.
Yeah, one piece of advice: ask your mentor and your manager which meetings you should not attend. I had just joined Elasticsearch, and you know, my manager pointed out the group calendar. I guess it was the company-wide calendar, and you know, there was a meeting that night, and I joined, and about 15 minutes into it, I realized, oh, this is the board meeting, and it's stuff that I'm not supposed to know about. So I quickly dropped off and, you know, and let my manager know, look, I screwed up. I joined that board meeting. We might be in trouble. So, yeah, get advice from your mentor, I think, is the best advice on which meetings, you know, are important. Maybe outside of your engineering team, and, you know, of course, the engineering manager for the ones that are important within that team.
Yeah, my manager does inform us, especially the newcomers, if there are certain such meetings, that please don't attend those. So that's really useful. Artem, you had your hand up?
Yes, I was about to say that in my personal experience, you can have a meeting day or not some meeting day. So the only solution that works for me is bunching meetings into larger blocks that I can spend realizing that I'm doing, well, unavoidable things that should be done. I'm meeting people, I'm getting up to speed on what's going on, and doing some maybe personal work in other periods of time, because what doesn't work for me is switching between the one and the other.
Yeah, I totally agree. Kirtana, you have something to say?
Yeah, I hope you can hear me well.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So on the question of too many meetings, I wanted to share something that helped me. So at some point, I mean, I experienced the same. At some point, I felt like there were just too many meetings, and I felt like all I did was attend meetings and not doing any actual work throughout the day. So what I did is I set up a meeting with my manager. I actually did this exercise where I listed all the meetings per week and figured out how much time I'm spending in meetings in a week. So that kind of shows you how much time you have left for actual work. So then you have to, I mean, then I kind of figured out what's the optional ones, what I can afford to kind of skip here and there. So sometimes in a role, it becomes like meetings are like inevitable, essential part of your life, but it helps to at least make it clear that, okay, 4 hours of your day is going in meetings. That means you can actually spend the remaining 4 hours in actually executing your work. So that kind of helped calm my nerves and set the expectations as well.
Yeah, that helps us plan better. Kirtana is our Jira expert, which is why the planning. Okay, so there's another question. There's a question here. So how does your onboarding experience apply to volunteer writers and external contributors? Anyone wants to, Julia, or anyone wants to
I
take
wrote a reply here because I thought you had not seen this.
Oh,
but yeah, I think some of the tips still apply, right? If you're contributing to a new project, you have to become familiar with the project, with the people behind the project, so you can still, be proactive, ask questions, find and bridge any gaps that you might have. Of course, it's not going to be like a formal process, like HR materials to read and stuff. But I think the challenges will be similar, right? Especially if you're coming from something entirely different and you're not familiar with the project itself that you want to contribute to. Was that the question you had in mind?
yeah, that does seem to. Do you have a follow-up question? Okay, that seems good. Anyone else has any other questions they would like to ask? Oh wow, I've got 2 hands up. Kirtana, your hand was still up. Are you going to ask something?
Sorry, I think it's not heard.
Okay. So, Pamela, let's go to you.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that point up. I'm just started to volunteer to Julia's posted issue. I'm a new volunteer. I'm in the process of interviewing with Canonical as a technical author, and I'm very glad that I attended this meeting because I felt like, well, I should try to make a good impression with a first issue, but of course I've got other things to do. But then I was feeling, well, I just can't really put in the full commitment still. So I'm glad to hear these things for, if you were onboarding, but yes, it does apply to, I think, volunteers. Thanks very much for your presentation.
Yes, we totally agree. And it's not just people who are onboarding who are just busy with work, it's everyone. So when I did say earlier on that we want people to continue and finish up the issues, but we totally understand. We ourselves are also so busy with work that sometimes we don't get time to respond to the peers, and I'm guilty of that. So I totally understand. Hope whoever is, hope people forgive me for that. Anyways, so Peter, you have a question?
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, everyone. Sorry. My name is Peter. So my question has to do with in cases of when you're in a startup, like you find yourself in a startup where there's little to no onboarding, and it's probably even specified in the job description that they call it fast-paced now, right? Some people mask lack of onboarding. They just mask it behind the word fast-paced. So they tell you that, that we need to quickly start getting work done. And so let's say you find yourself in a startup where you have to start getting work done, and you also need to apply some of the elements mentioned by Julia. And how do you blend it together when you have to start getting real work done, and you also have to get to know the company, get to know the product, and things like that?
Can I take this, Dimple? Yeah.
Sure.
So this is a really good question, Peter. In fact, I have worked in startups and in companies where I was the only technical writer for many years, and I do understand the hidden meaning behind fast pace, as in you have to kind of figure it out on your own. So yeah, in this case, I would still advise that you try to agree on some milestones and checkpoints with your manager, right? Just to establish clear expectations. If there is no onboarding process, no mentor available, and you kind of have to wing it, I would at least make sure to set clear expectations. Otherwise, how do you know if you are doing well or, or lagging behind? That's the only thing I can actually think of. But then the rest applies, being proactive and all that, and filling the gaps independently. But in this case, it's really extremely important that you and your manager are on the same page. Otherwise, it's impossible to manage.
Yeah, I totally agree there. A startup, and if you are agreeing with your manager and in sync there, I think most problems will get solved. Dan?
Yeah, at ClickHouse, I was the only writer, and my manager and his manager didn't care at all about the docs. So you might have to find someone to guide you outside of your direct organization. If maybe they're too busy to worry about the docs. For me, it was the founder, the development founder of the company, the CTO. He really cared about the documentation because he knew for years that people depended on the docs, and so we formed a very close relationship, and that was the way I survived there for as long as I did, which wasn't too long. But yeah, find someone outside of the organization if you can't find someone in your chain of command.
That's some good advice, as long as you can find someone. Any more questions? Okay, maybe I'll ask a question that kind of troubles me quite a bit. So we have, during onboarding also, we have all these different tasks to do. So we got to learn stuff from the engineering team. We got to learn tools and stuff from the documentation team. There are other training tasks, compliance tasks, and so on. So there's so much to learn, and they're also varied. So how do you prioritize your task, and how do you decide which one should I be doing? Anyone?
Anyone, right? If nobody takes it, I'll take it, Dimple.
Sure.
Okay, everybody's shy tonight. Oh, there was someone speaking.
No, it was just me. Go ahead, Julia.
Yeah, so prioritizing tasks is not easy, especially if they've been already assigned to you by different managers, perhaps. So it means they have already pre-prioritized those for you. But now you have to, make it all work in the short time span of your onboarding month or whatever. I think, like someone said, I think it was Sally who said this, maybe start from the so-called low-hanging fruit first, right? Do something that seems easy, that you can complete in a short time, to just say, I've done it, and show progress. And then maybe the way I do it, I try to kind of pick something from, in the onboarding phase at least, I was trying to pick something from each onboarding line. So I didn't do all the HR onboarding and then moved over to the documentation onboarding, right? So I'm trying to progress organically, but that's maybe just a matter of personal preference. What do you think, Dimple?
Yeah, I mean, I did find it difficult, and I do find it difficult usually to prioritize my tasks. So I just land up doing stuff. And as long as I'm constantly doing stuff, things get done, and there are good results happening, and that sort of validates it. So unless there's a specific deadline or some real requirement urgent, it's kind of difficult for me to prioritize. But maybe that's why all the planning helps and the roadmaps, they do help. But yeah, but as long as something is being done constantly, things just go on and then they just get created. So it's that's what I do and it's fun. Artem, you want to say something?
Yes. Speak about prioritizing tasks, especially when working remotely, you have probably less to rely on. Again, the only thing I found working for myself is maintaining not a single stack of tasks, but several stacks of tasks, so tracks, and switching between them depending on how urgent things become here or there. And the thing is, you need to maintain each stack separately, prioritizing tasks there separately. But then again, you have to dedicate some time to actually deciding which track are you going to attend to next. So it's a bit of, juggling, burning garbage. But that's the only thing that works, just like I said.
So Sharon here says that she's given a comment here. So someone once said this for their onboarding experience at Canonical. It's like drinking from a fire hose for the first 6 months. And she says, I've never felt more understood. So there are a lot of people here in the same boat. Pamela.
I was wondering, like, what is, how many projects typically do people work on? Like, what is a typical, is there any typical?
Yeah, so usually we are assigned to an engineering team. So we are working on that project. But as technical authors, we are also part of the documentation team. So we are assigned to that team also. And that's about it. There are some general things that we do for the company, like compliance training or taking interviews and stuff. That's not really a project, but that also does take up some time.
I think it's difficult to compare because some projects are really big and they sometimes kind of contain multiple other components that can themselves be products. And that product that I'm talking about might be a really popular product with a lot of customer feedback that needs to be dealt with quickly. Then there's other products that are, in the beta phase, other products that are very stable and, unchanging, that have very mature documentation sets. But for me, I'm in Canonical now for, as I said, 3 or 4 months. And I mean, I think I've kind of touched 4 or 5 products, but I've been primarily focused on 2 or 3. But those products, we're not getting a constant stream of customer feedback. I've been able to work with them at my own pace and with my team in a relatively comfortable way. But I think if you're comparing workloads across technical authors, for example, it's difficult to do it on a how many products basis because the products are also different.
Yeah, and Sally mentions that we also do secondments to other teams. So we work on their docs. So that's another set of teams that we work with. Andrea, you want to say something?
No, just that I think for some reason, and I have some theories about that reason, but for a lot of us, it's like we have a ton of projects going on at the same time, usually more than we planned, but we keep on taking stuff because, I don't know, I think part of it is that we're just naturally inclined to do this, to like, oh, that's interesting, that's shiny, or like, oh, what are you working on? I can help with this. And it just ends up, yeah, I don't know. It's both good and bad, I think.
Too many, but also not enough. That's what she says.
Never feel
and
like
I agree. It's just fun to do a lot of different things. So we feel like doing them and we feel like trying them out. But at the same time, we don't have a lot of time. So
yeah, despite it being more work, sometimes working on something outside of your everyday responsibility can be refreshing or stimulating. And when you go back to what you normally work on, it can help you look at things in a different way. So yeah, it can feel like an additional burden, but I think there are benefits sometimes, as long as you keep it under wraps.
you really have to keep it under wraps.
Yes, I think so.
Cool. So, any other questions?
I just think something I wanted to say is that, you know, it's a common thing that technical writers and technical authors have to do on a day-to-day basis, is to look at some instructions or respond to some instructions and say, you know, this is not clear, or I'm not sure what the expectations are of me, or the user will not be sure about the expectations of them based on what they're reading or what's being communicated to them. So I think also during onboarding, when you're getting feedback and you're getting a lot of direction, I think it's fair to say that, you know, something isn't clear. It might not be clear, and that feedback that you're giving might be very valuable to the people who are trying to get you through the onboarding process. I think often managers and the people who are directing you, they really want to, you know, it to be, they want to help you and they want to get you through the process. And if you have some way that you can contribute to helping yourself through the process and also future people who are going to be onboarded, I think that can be a really important contribution to the organization and also to your managers. Your managers will want to know how to manage. They want to help you. So the second thing I would say is, I just want, maybe it's a question, I'm not sure, this thing of working with exceptional people. I wonder, is there any, do you have any tips, Julia, when you're surrounded by very talented, very intelligent people? Do you have any tips on how to succeed in such an environment, or how to operate in such a world?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know how to succeed among extremely successful people, but I guess some of their greatness can rub off on you. So what I do is I really try to listen and observe. And I mean, it's odd, I think, the ways that people can impact you and influence you. Sometimes maybe you think you're not making an impact in any way, but maybe someone else is looking up to you, right? So yeah, what I do is I just try to observe and be near those people so that some of their greatness can rub off on me. And there are a lot of great people in here, I can tell you. It's not just singing the praises of Canonical. It is true. I mean, there are some really exceptional people in here. So,
Artem?
Yeah, speaking about working with exceptional people, of which I haven't had a plenty. The only thing that comes to mind is authenticity. Focus on that. You do you, because this is both very easy and very hard. Very easy because this is the only thing you can do. You cannot be someone else. You can only pretend at being someone else. But the urge, it's very hard to beat the urge to pretend that you're someone else, that you're expected to be someone else. Speak about the imposter syndrome, and that's what it is, I think.
Yeah, that is a great point. Sharon?
Also, something else Dara told me last week. So I was really struggling with this. So I feel like everyone is so smart, and okay, like Julia said, why am I here? What am I doing? I don't understand anything. So most of the time it's just false. You probably know. I mean, that's why you're here. That's why you're doing the job. But what you need to do is just don't be afraid to ask questions, however stupid you think they are. Because sometimes I feel like, most of us maybe feel like you don't want to be seen
dumb, but it's okay to be dumb. Just ask all the dumb questions and you'll be surprised that they're actually not dumb.
Yeah, and I'll just come to you, Andrea. So one sort of a trick that I've learned in this regard, I used to have this problem a lot. And then once in a while, if you go out and meet some totally new people who don't know anything about your work or anything about you, and then you start talking to them, and then you suddenly realize that, oh yeah, you've been doing a lot of stuff, and they're like impressed, and you tend to understand that, oh yeah, you've also been doing stuff, and it's not, you tend to forget what you are doing on your own when you are surrounded by all these great people. All you see is what others are doing. And then, so if you go and meet some random people, you might actually feel a little better about yourself. Andrea? Andrea, you wanted to say something? Okay, Sharon? Or Sally? I see quite a few hands up.
Sharon was first.
Can you hear me? Okay.
We can't quite hear you. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep, you're good.
So I was saying that another thing that would help to not compliment, but like point out when someone does something good, however small, within your teams. Last week, Andrea told me something that I had no idea about, and it actually put confidence and makes you feel like, well, I am doing something. So try to do that to other people as well.
Yeah, that's a very nice thing. Sally?
I decided to that my imposter syndrome is here to stay and it's never going anywhere. And yeah, I decided to kind of lean into it really and just kind of accept the fact that like everybody around me knows way more than I do about all of this stuff. And actually that's okay. You know, as a technical author, I have to be able to translate what they're saying into stuff that is for not developers, essentially. Like developers are so accustomed to speaking about this stuff with each other that sometimes I think they forget that non-developers exist and that they can't just use the same jargon. And like, so part of like using imposter syndrome to my advantage is I ask lots of questions and people have gotten used to my questions now, but it kind of challenges them to think differently about how they're communicating. And I think that's kind of how you try and turn something that feels quite crippling, like, oh my God, I'm such an idiot, I'm going to be found out very soon, into something where it actually is an advantage.
Very, very interesting and useful point. Andrea? We are almost out of time, but Andrea, you can just go ahead. No, I don't think her mic is fixed yet. Okay, we are almost at the top of the hour. And let's stop the recording here in case anyone wants to ask something. Thank you so much, Julia. That was really fun and very reassuring and very comforting. Thank you everyone so much for joining. We'll hope to see you again soon next week. Take care and have fun.